Alrighty, welcome to our first and brand new segment of Ministry Insights. Um, I'm Caleb, and here we have a couple of guests joining us. We're going to start here. If you want to introduce yourself, name and age.
I'm Eli Parrish. I'm 15 years old.
I'm Trent Stroud, and I'm 16 years old.
I'm Evelyn and I'm 15.
I'm Sana and I'm 17.
So, obviously, we have a bunch of ignorant teenagers here with us today. No, they're going to give us some good insight on how the church can better serve the youth, or how the youth can also serve in the ministry. Before we get started with the questions, I would like to read these two verses. It's Ephesians 4, 11 through 13. And it says, "And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors, and some teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ." So what this verse is telling us is that we have all these different types of teachers in this ministry to help us, the next generation, or you guys, the next generation now, to come up and to know the Son of God fully and to be more like Christ. So keep that verse in mind as we go through some of these questions. This first question, if y'all are ready, is what are the biggest spiritual problems that are affecting y'all's generation today? You don't have to go in any particular order. Just whoever has the first thing that pops into their head, just go ahead and say something.
So I had to look up this word, but I think a lot of people nowadays, a lot of high schoolers, middle schoolers, all of this, people our age are uh, absurdists, which means they basically don't believe there is a God and they don't believe there is a reason to have one.
Yeah.
So they don't believe, like, they have no reason to look for something because they don't think that it could give them any benefit. They don't see a point.
Yeah.
So there's no point for them and there's no reason to look for a point.
That's
So
interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. And see, I was taking an apologetics class, and I was doing research on some paper, and I was doing a study on morality, and this was 2 years ago, and the study showed, and I bet it might be more now, but it said that over 65% of the high schoolers at the time did not believe in objective morality. So pretty much truth and rules was just pretty much however you felt at the time. And that is a cause of not believing or needing a reason to have a God. If you don't have a God, you don't have a true basis for that morality. So I can see how that would be. I didn't think about that, but that is a big problem. Who else? That was a great answer. So for me, whenever I was y'all's age, which wasn't that long ago, honestly, I did struggle, I can say, with my identity in Christ. I remember I was 14 whenever I received my calling to want to preach. And then for the next 3 years, I just remember all this. For the next 3 years, I pretty much did everything I could to ignore that calling and to honestly just stay as far away as that as possible. And the first thing, or the first reason why, is because I didn't like speaking in front of a crowd. But because I was running away from that calling, because I was running away from what Christ was calling me to be, I just ended up getting mixed up in all sort of just horrible situations, making a whole lot of bad decisions. But it was all because I didn't know who I was going to be. All I knew is who I was trying to avoid at the time. But once Christ put me in a position to where I had no choice but to rely on Him and to open up my heart to Him fully, that is whenever I became secure in who I was in the person of Christ. So that was just an issue I faced whenever I was y'all's age. Can y'all think of anything similar to that y'all might be going through, or someone you know? I mean, what is a problem that you want to let people know that you guys are facing? Because the first step to for people to be able to help you is you got to let them know what problems you need help with. And again, not you guys specifically, but y'all's generation.
So I hear very often kids my age talk about struggles with anxiety or stress and things of that nature. And I almost think to myself, like, what do we have to worry about? We don't have to worry about paying bills. We don't have to worry about mouths to feed.
Yeah.
Why do we have this stress? Why do we have this anxiety, worry? And I think what it is we have struggles with our identity. We're afraid of not fitting in. We're afraid of not being cool. Certain things happen to us in our walks of life, and it tears us down, and it causes us to have these emotions. And I feel like sometimes as teenagers, we don't do a really good job of handling those emotions. I feel like sometimes we can store it up, and I think that can cause anxiety, stress, because it almost feels like I have all these issues, and you're not going to talk to anybody about it, but you're just going to store them up. So every single obstacle that you face seems so much higher because you are just stressed out and have all these emotions built up. And I think also that's why it's hard to maybe approach kids our age or teens our age with the gospel, is because they already have all this stress, all this anxiety, and then they see Jesus as just adding another thing to their plate.
That's good.
This is going to cause me more anxiety, but that's not what Jesus is here to do. He's here to take that load off of us. It says those who are burdened and heavy laden, he will give us rest. And that's not saying that like our walks as Christians, like life is going to be so much easier as you're Christians, but the things you are doing, you'll find purpose in. And I feel like that's almost speaking to people who, teens who aren't necessarily Christian, but I think also we have our own worries as Christians, because we still struggle with identity, but we can fall back on whenever we want to that we have our identities in God.
Yeah.
But I feel like we can also worry about is we see these things in our life right now and we're like wondering, God, where are you? Like, why don't I see you working in this situation? But we need to have trust in him. We need to not worry because he's working.
Yeah.
He's in everything around us, and it's all part of our plan. We just got to trust that.
That kind of reminds me of, I can't remember where it's at specifically, but a verse in Romans. And Paul tells us, our job isn't here to be here to please man, but to please God. And I was thinking about that, especially whenever you mentioned, the stress of trying to fit in, or go with society. But when we have our identity in Christ, then we know that's not who we have to be or what we have to do anymore. What we're trying to do is to please God and bring glory to him. That's awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts on this question? Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on to question number 2, which is, how can the church reach out to the teens better? And I know I said this earlier, but specifically with this question is the lost teens of y'all's generation. So what's something that the church can do to reach out to them or draw them in to make it, to present it to where it's more than just adding another thing on their plate?
Sorry, but I was thinking, because
You're supposed to talk.
I did ask you a question.
our school. I don't know. I think he's pastor or something. He goes around like always brings cookies or pizza and he talks to the kids. But like still, even if some of those kids aren't Christian or whatever, he's still kind of like instead of like at church you're talking to the kids, you're bringing them Bible stuff, but you're like actually interacting with the kids and setting an example for them is a good way, and just giving them opportunities to see what like living as a Christian would be like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my youth pastor.
Mhm.
But yeah, I also think it would be like treating kids like equals instead of like little kids that have no idea what they're talking about. Because I mean, I know anytime someone talks to me like I'm older than 10 years old, then like my respect for them instantly goes up. And then like I have a friend and he is also a Christian friend, but like he doesn't really respect, I guess, like older male figures in his life because he sees them as like his dad, like someone, or like not in a good way, like someone that just tells him what to do, makes sure he doesn't do like terrible things, just like kind of like guides him, but it's like kind of away from him, not on a personal level at all. And I think that's a big problem because like I see in his life a lot, it's just there's a lot of things that he doesn't know how to respond to because like he doesn't have any male figures in his life that he really trusts or that he really sees as equals to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like
So like whenever you're saying to see them more mature, would that look like receiving dialogue from them specifically? Like
yeah.
if I ask you a question, just making sure I'm paying attention to the
Yeah.
answer to that question.
It
type of
like
thing?
if you're talking to me and you actually seem like you actually care, or then it's like then we have like an actual friendship. To me, then I'm like we're friends. He cares about me. I care about him. We can talk, but I think a lot of people just don't have that because they've never had a person that treats them like that.
Yeah.
It's either they go like all the way treating them like kids or like all the way treating them like you shouldn't have any responsibility, you should just stay in your lane or whatever. But yeah.
I know I've said this for our podcast before, but I'm not going to quote this properly at all. But I did have one of the older guys at the church I go to tell me that no one cares about how much you know until they know about how much you care, and that's kind of what I was thinking there. Like you can, it almost seems like I could approach someone younger than me, and I can tell them everything that I know up to my point in life. But if they don't think I care about them at all, then just does no good.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what?
Yeah, and I think sometimes they can go hand in hand. Like if you're really trying to help someone, it's just sometimes it can come across as you just being like, "Oh yeah, when I was a kid, I went through that, so I'm going to make sure that you don't make the same mistake as me." So then, to me, sometimes it would feel like, "Oh, like you're just micromanaging me." And so I think, but I do think those can go hand in hand, but it's just not always perceived like that from both sides.
Yeah. So having the relationship is important, and a good way to build it is to give them pizza. Right? It's a great way to get them to trust you. So, Evelyn, Eli, do y'all have any thoughts on this? On reaching out to the lost?
I mean, I think a lot of like reaching out to the youth, I mean, that has to be up to us more so, like Christian teenagers, Christians in our generation, because I mean, like Trent said, sometimes it doesn't work whenever like an older figure goes and speaks to like a younger unbeliever, because I mean there's just like that gap right there, and I mean might come across as condescending or just not genuine. But I think that's up to us almost as teens to like share the gospel with them, because I mean we're kind of on their wavelength and on their level. So I think part of what you can do is, and I think this kind of goes into your next question, but just readying us to share the gospel. That's pouring truth into our lives, um, so that we know what to say to one another.
Mhm.
Just, and I mean, there's different ways to share the gospel, of course, like we mentioned.
Yeah.
But
So here's an additional question. I like y'all are saying, like the best way to reach out to the teens is to equip other teens to go out there. But for someone like me and my wife, we don't have teens yet. If there's someone I'm feeling, God pulling on my heart to go and talk to, what would be the best way for me to go about doing that? Like if y'all, like let's say it was one of y'all,
mhm.
how could I approach y'all to have this conversation? Let's say I already know your name. You already know my name. There's already an introduction there. Um, but I'm wanting to have this conversation, to have this type of dialogue to figure out, have you accepted Christ? Is coming out and asking that question outright, would that be too intimidating, y'all think, at that standpoint? Or
I mean,
I think one of the best things you can do.
I think if you're, I mean, to me personally, like if someone told me, like, I was gonna say, if you're gonna like speak to a teen, I would start off saying like, I see God working in your life, and I mean maybe that's them taking a step towards ministry, maybe that's them taking a step towards faith. But I think a great way to start that conversation is, I see Jesus working in your life, and just expand on that.
Mhm.
Maybe that's going down the path of they need to be saved. That's saying, I see Jesus working in your life. I think he's pulling you this direction, but it's up to you if you're going to answer. Can you let me know like how you're addressing this?
Yeah.
Everything, and also let them know that like I'm here for you. Also,
Mhm.
you need to talk, because I mean that's helpful. Like I talked about building up emotions earlier. It's helpful to have an outlet.
Mhm.
And I mean sometimes that's good, like someone like your age, because I mean y'all aren't too old to where we can't like relate with y'all, but you're also not like our age, so we still have respect for you.
Mhm.
At the same time. But I'd almost be like, I see God working in your life. um, I think he's pulling you this direction, can you tell me what you think? So that way it's not condescending, but that way it's also showing that you care.
Yeah.
You're genuine. I think Trent was going to say something.
Oh yeah, well, uh, I think if it kind of depends on the situation, but if it's like someone that maybe you go to church with or something, you just don't know them very well. Like if you asked them to coffee, I've gone and got coffee with a bunch of the guys at my church, and that's just like impactful for me because it's like, okay, they actually care. Like that's something that's like they actually care. They're not doing this in front of other people, you know? Like this
Yeah.
isn't for show. They actually want to know what's up, and then it's like they actually care about me. They want to talk to me, and we're going to get coffee. And I don't know. That's just like it makes me respect someone
Yeah.
so much more. It's just like, oh, you want to
I
take time.
I do think y'all are exactly right there, because I can even remember that when my dad would go have coffee with some of the guys here at the church, then I'd be like, oh man, it'd be so cool to see what kind of conversations they were having. And then all of a sudden, they were like, hey, Caleb, do you want to come get coffee? Or my dad would just tell me he wants me to go with him. And then because of that, I was just fully engaged. This is something that's a little silly, but some of my dad and his friends, they had a group chat, and then they invited me onto the group chat, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. They text nonstop, One of them's a trucker, and he'll text at like 3 a.m. sometimes. But it's all like really great and deep stuff. And they'll even, I think it's the coolest thing ever still when they're like, "Hey, Caleb, what's your thoughts on this?" You know. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the I talked to so many of my friends about like how to have a gospel friendship, like a gospel centered
Mm.
friendship, and I think the best way to start that in someone's life is by having that with them, like having that with a kid and showing him this is what your friendships can be like, where like you're actually talking about the Bible, you're actually talking about God, you're talking about like if you are reading the Bible, what you read this morning, what's up. And I think it's like that's something that a lot of times like like Eli was saying, like evangelism, not always, but sometimes that's more our job with those people are our age. But I think like the setting us up for that is by like leading by example and showing us this is kind of the goal. I know like no one's perfect, but it's just like but you've lived way longer than me, so like
No, not way long.
th-
Barely.
3 times
He's
as long,
exaggerating.
probably. Yeah, but yeah, it's something like leading by example, and like I know a lot of people have like talked to me, and then I take that and I talk to my friends, and then our whole relationship changes because of that. And it started from someone mentoring me or someone mentoring one of my friends, and that's just like, and it made an impact.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Do y'all have anything y'all would like to add?
Yeah. Just whenever you're talking to them, I don't know, we're talking about it later, but like act more natural about it. Like just approach the kid and be like, "Oh yeah," and then leave, and then like don't talk to him until the next Sunday. Just like keep
Like,
up with
hey,
them during
man,
the week.
what's your aura levels?
Exactly.
Or
No.
something like that.
That's true.
Was that
Yeah.
Sigma enough?
yeah,
That's
Okay.
how me and Trent's conversations
So
are.
Santa, real quick, just be careful with the table because of the mics. You're
Come
okay.
on,
You're okay.
Santa.
No, but yeah, I was gonna like go off that because I feel like whenever I approach someone about the Bible, I just like do it really quickly because I'm nervous about it
Mhm.
instead of like actually taking the time to getting to know them and what they're going through, and then like kind of like slowly instead of just pushing on them.
So Christians are as afraid of you as you are of them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Just don't show your fear.
they smell fear.
Yeah.
They'll use it against you.
But okay, so the takeaway is not what the lost smells, but it is that you guys for sure.
I mean, sometimes there's a very strong smell.
Mainly on this side of the table, not much
Okay.
over here. But I mean, y'all can honestly say, I think from this conversation, like y'all are not afraid of the challenge to be told to go out and evangelize.
Yeah.
Y'all are ready for that.
Mhm.
So if you're listening and if you're in charge of the teens, make sure you're watching for them when they get to a point when they're ready for more. Don't hold them back from that. So I'm going to read one more scripture, and that sets up this last question I'm going to ask y'all. This is 1 Timothy 4:12, and it says, "Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity." So this next question is, how can the church better equip you guys to go out and to be disciples? I mean, y'all said y'all are ready for more. So what can that look like when the church, when you're like, hey, give me more, I want to do more? What is, maybe they narrow it down, what does it look like when y'all serve or y'all minister to others? Like, how can the church present you with an opportunity to go do that? What comes to mind?
So I'm actually familiar with that verse, those few verses, but I know the next one, 1 Timothy 4:13. It says, "Do not neglect the gifts you have." So I think part of being an elder in the church, or part of like cultivating youth or kids or teens' faith, is recognizing certain abilities they have, certain gifts they have. Like one person in the group might be more outgoing than another, one might be more quiet. And I mean, both of those are helpful in the kingdom of God, but maybe one would be better at one thing than the other. So I think part of that is noticing what they're good at and then helping them with that, putting them in those situations where they can thrive. And also, we mentioned earlier, just equipping them with the gospel, equipping them with truth so that they are able to share the gospel without fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that's all I have.
That's good. It kind of reminds me whenever you're saying that when God appeared to Moses and he gives him all these excuses, and then he ends up to the point where he also mentions, I just can't talk very good in front of people. And then God has an answer for that, and he sends Aaron to go with him. Now, it turns out later on, Moses gets this courage and ends up being able to do the talking himself. But God still sent someone with Moses who was comfortable with talking to other people until Moses got to the point he needed to be at. That's good. Any other thoughts on this question? What is your church doing for you? Whether it's what opportunities has your church given you to be able to equip you better? That's all I had.
I think it's good that we do no boundaries, because when we go, we can see what like other ministries like look like, and not just trying to picture it for ourselves or just going out like not knowing what we're doing, and so we get like a feel of it with no boundaries.
Seeing ministry outside of a church building.
Yeah, I think, like building respect and then building enough respect to where you can rebuke them. I think that's important, and I think it's like not talked about very much. But being able to rebuke someone, I think that's super important. And it's just kind of like, well, we don't talk about that much because it doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
But I think that's important because, I mean, even if you don't know what you're doing is wrong, or maybe you really do know what you're doing is wrong, you just need someone to say, hey, I notice what you're doing. It's wrong. You need the kind of like I think it said like prophet or whatever in your life to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong and it's sinful. And so, yeah. And I think like that's true for everyone in or out of the church.
Yeah.
So.
And I would like to expand on that if that's okay. And also, like, maybe someone knows that you are ready for more and you're not pushing yourself like you should. Does that make sense? Like, if you want to preach, then I've always heard people tell me, just because a church isn't giving you an opportunity to preach yet, you still need to work on that craft because that is your calling. You still go out and you still prepare sermons. Because if God's put a sermon in your heart and you prepare that sermon, he's going to give you the place. Maybe he's just waiting on you to have that sermon ready. So maybe, just someone saying, because without my dad pushing me and now my wife pushing me with my sermons to improve my sermons, probably wouldn't get any better. It for sure wouldn't get any better. But yeah, just having that accountability, that's good.
Like, what do you mean, like taking notes over it or leading a Bible study so you're getting at least a little bit of experience, or even with, I don't know what, like preaching, but like with music, and leading a Bible like praise band or something.
Yeah.
Or teaching the younger kids.
Yeah.
Just expanding.
I think also like similar to that, like encouraging the youth to start something for themselves. So if it's like a Bible study or something where you make homeless like packets, it's like anything. Start that for themselves so that like even in that experience they equip themselves either from just doing it or like from their own failure because like you're saying like with your sermons you don't really get better unless you fail.
Hmm.
You learn from that, and so start now, encourage them to like not always like babying them through it,
Hmm.
encourage them to start something for themselves. I think that's important.
That's good. That's
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, as Christians, a lot of times we have to seek out things on our own.
awesome.
And I mean, it's good to have, like we talked about, like having mentors and stuff to go to, but you're still going to have to go through a lot of self development in your faith. And I think a lot of that is in your youth, but I think a great way to get better at that or to grow is, like Trent talked about, like having things you can do in your own, like leading your own Bible study or like having your own like accountability group about
Yeah.
reading the Bible or whatever it is, just having those things on your own that aren't necessarily like adult led. That way you can get more used to like just the ministry aspect and that way you can grow yourself more.
I feel like what youth do on their own is where a lot of people start to get like lukewarm,
Mhm.
and it's what they do on their own that I think really matters because it's like in the Bible, Jesus, there's the people tithing tons of money, but there's the one woman that gives a penny, and he says like, and she does it in secret. It's all she has.
Mhm.
She said, and he says, "Blessed is her for giving all she has." And then I think like it's about what you do alone, you and God.
Yeah.
I think like that's a big part of what equips you.
Mhm.
And so I think encouraging people to do that for themselves and make their own relationship and make their own decision and their own profession of faith.
Yeah.
That's important.
That's good.
I know what you mean. You talk about people are hesitant about when teens are seeking things out on their own, like what they do on their own. And like you said, that's where they have, like, that's what matters the most because, I mean, everybody acts like a Christian in church. They're going to put on their best face for church. They're going to look perfect. Try to be they're going to try to look like their best selves whenever they go to church. But that's not what God judges us by. He judges us by whenever we're around a group of people and we're faced with like a decision, like where how are we going to react to this? Like when we're on our own, like whenever we're faced with temptation, how are we going to react? Because we don't have that at church.
Yeah.
It's what we do on our own, and that's what we're judged by.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where I think a lot of people fall away in their faith is because they have that relationship with God at church, but whenever they go home, they don't have a relationship with Him at all. They're not reading their Bible, they're not praying, they're not sharing the Word, they're not surrounding themselves with good people, and I think that causes them to fall away because they don't have genuine faith.
I think I was reading this one thing, and it was like basically the majority of people who end up um, leaving the church are the people who like go out and go to college. So it's like once they're out from under their parents' roof, once they stop going to that home church and they go out on their own, then they majority of them sadly just don't return. They don't come back to that state. And this is definitely not the teens' fault. It's I think, and me and my dad have talked about this, like the true way to measure the success of your youth group is not by the numbers, but you're not going to know how successful you are until they're in their 20s. Because if they're still coming back to the church or if they're still serving the ministry, then your youth program, whether it was just 3 teens, was very successful versus the person who had 20 and only 2 came back. and they just lost all the others because at some point the church just got way more wrapped up in the number of attendees. But yeah, that's probably for a different conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned being under your parents' roof. 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 What? Roof.
ROO.
Roof. But being under your parents' roof. My gosh, it's a 4-letter word.
Living with your parents.
Back up. Anyway, you can't ride your parents' coattails
Mhm.
in your faith. I mean, I've grown up in a Christian home my entire life, but that doesn't mean I've never been faced with temptation. That doesn't mean I've never sinned.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean my walk with God's been easy because my parents are Christian. Like, we're gonna have to go through tribulations, and yeah, I don't really know where I was going with this, but
I mean, at some
Yeah,
point, you gotta
it's-
make your salvation your own.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember like when someone asked me like if your parents weren't Christians, would you be? And it was just like, whoa, like that's a crazy question. And like who knows, like, and I would want to say yes.
Mm.
And I like at the time I was like, I want to say yes, but I can't.
Mhm.
Like I just can't. And like I have all these questions that I don't have answers to, and I have like all these like so much that I don't know, and there's still so much I don't know. But it was just like there's so much stuff that I've been told, like, oh yeah, story of Jonah from the Bible, you know, like I would just realize like I don't even know if it's in the Bible. Like I've never read it for myself. Like just that example everywhere. Like people would say stuff and I'd be like, does the Bible actually say that? Where does it say that? And so then it was just like the only way to answer is by reading it myself. And then that's when you can have your when you can really say like make your faith your own, you know. And I think it's just like something a lot of people don't really care about. They just like it was saying is like ride their parents' coattails, and I think it's something that is a problem. But yeah,
That's awesome. That's good. Any other thoughts before we close this out? Awesome. So thank y'all again for agreeing to do this little interview, and I think a lot of great answers, a lot of great input. So once again, thank you so much. Peace.